Good evening. Welcome to Live United. Live United is an opportunity to share stories and resources throughout the Monadnock region that are making a difference in the lives of our citizens. And today we're actually going to feature Monadnock United Way, who hosts this show, sharing those resources. And typically we don't feature the United Way, but we're just getting ready for campaign kickoff. And many of the programs that you hear about during the show may be funded or non-funded partners with the United Way. They're the ones that are really out there making a difference in lives of people. But what you do as citizens in terms of the campaign that the Monadnock United Way runs is what actually makes these programs available, these resources available out there. So today, I'm pleased to have with me Cameron Tease. Cameron is the Resource Development Director at the Monadnock United Way, which is a position change title, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Because there's been some changes at the United Way. But Cam has a long history with the United Way. So Cam, welcome.
Thank you, Kelly. Glad to be here.
And it's fun to have you here because we're co-workers and colleagues, and I just so respect and admire the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
So tell us how you got involved with the United Way originally, and what brought you here today to now being the person really running the workplace campaigns.
It's hard for me to believe that I'm actually here as an employee with the United Way, because in the early 80s when I came to the Monadnock region, I had never been involved as a volunteer. I had been a contributor, but I came to work for Peerless, now Liberty. They brought me to the area. I loved the idea of being in New England. I had been, as a child, looked at Yankee magazine. My godparents got it all the time, and I'd go to their house, and I just dreamed of being in New England for the small town flavors and the beauty. And when I came up here to work for Peerless, they were very involved in the campaign, the United Way campaign, encouraged me to become. Some of my mentors, Bob Pine, George Douglas, various people, later Joe Youngs, really encouraged the community involvement. So I did it because I knew it would be the right thing to do, but it wasn't until the mid-'80s that I got involved in volunteering and really got to see the campaign and all the wonderful things about the United Way, the Monadnock United Way. And I could go on because the next 30-some years, I've been a volunteer almost every year, except a few when I was down in Georgia. So I then retiring from Markham Homage this past April and wanting to continue to work, but doing something after being in business for 40-some years, wanting to do something I would say closer to my heart. The opportunity at the United Way came up, and I'm just thrilled to be here. It's self-actualization for me.
You know, it's interesting because I think your story sort of parallels the history of Monadnock United Way. When we think back 62 years to when it started, it was really people like you, and you've been involved for half of that time in the United Way, but it was a group of people coming together, and I think originally it was called the Red Feather Club.
The community chest, yes. Yep. In 1952, a group of citizens, business leaders, called others together to talk about having one campaign. And at that point, I believe there were 12 agencies that the first campaign supported. And people like Ellis Robertson and Bob Babcock, people that I know of, and actually knew Bob a little bit, were part of the bringing business leaders together. And the red feather, as you say, was the symbol of the community chest. And over the years, it evolved to be a Monadnock United Way, but there's a long history there, very rich history. At 35 years and then 40 years after 1952, the United Way published histories of the United Way, listing some of those folks, some of the ups and downs, and I think you and I have talked about, I think at 62 years we should continue that tradition and continue that history because it's very rich.
It is a rich history, and it's one that was founded really in that belief that one ask of the community was really what sort of started it. And what it's become is a steward of those resources that our community does give, and really making sure that it's addressing the needs of the Monadnock region. And you mentioned that it started with about 12 programs, or 12 agencies, I think, at the time. We now fund over 50 programs out in the Monadnock region.
Right.
With resources. And we oftentimes have new partners coming in and, really responding to those changing needs that are out there. So you've now moved into the campaign role and resource development director. So share with the public what that means, because I'm sure they don't even, I know they don't know necessarily what my job is at the United Way, but what does it mean to be the resource development?
It's a lot different than being a volunteer, and I have a lot of respect for volunteers, and I'm very proud of those 30-some years. However, I would come to a meeting and there would be an agenda, there would be materials prepared. It was very focused on what a volunteer has to do, which is the most important thing, actually make the ask and say that, would you consider supporting the United Way? This is why I do. However, behind the scenes, all the logistical things, all the preparation, the communications, I think I was not really prepared for all that's involved, and it's a learning process. And I also knew that my predecessor in this job called something else, Mary Delisle, someone I have so much respect for. She always made it look so easy. And I've called her several times to try to, how do you make it look so easy? Where's this? Where's that? So it's everything from supporting the campaign staff, the chief volunteer, John Round, this year, our campaign director. He has recruited a full complement of volunteers, division chairs, leadership giving, team captains, communications committee, on and on. And it's behind the scenes giving support to that, who might be a good volunteer to recruit. Here are the position descriptions. Here's the timeline for the campaign. It's a lot of logistics, and fortunately we have the history in terms of electronic files, in terms of what's been done in the past, but it's a lot to go through.
It is, and I know there's a lot of training involved with those volunteers, a lot of ongoing support for months here, and a huge time commitment on their part to this. And it's so unique in a way that we continue here in the Monadnock region to have a theme and have this group of volunteers just dedicate this amount of time and resources to really facilitating this. Because when you think about the staff of the United Way, we're 6 individuals there, some of us part-time working, and it's really the volunteers that are making the difference. John as campaign head, and so it's a neat structure when I think about it, and a neat system that's in place around there, and such a valuable resource out in the community in terms of networking these volunteers and engaging them. Now, we have a theme this year. That's one of the things that makes Monadnock United Way a little bit different than some of the other United Ways. We've continued the tradition of having a theme. So can you share with us what our theme is this year?
Yes. Our communications committee, which is made up of both staff, I'm on it, our president, Kathy Harrington's on it, Gary Custer, our marketing manager's on it. But the volunteers and staff sit down and look at past campaign themes and just brainstorm in terms of trying to come up with a theme that resonates and can be fun. And this year's theme is wonder. And it evokes, and the materials show a child looking at a red book, and behind the child there's a window looking out at a mountain, possibly Mount Monadnock, and there's stars, and the child has this kind of wondering look to them. And it could be, I wonder if I'm going to have a roof over my head, or I wonder, who's going to take care of me, or just I wonder what I'm going to do tomorrow with my friends at school. But I think the child in all of us is kind of awakened by this theme in terms of we're all wondering. And some things we're wondering about are very serious, and wondering where we're going to get the help. So we really feel that this theme and the book, which can lend itself to any number of children's classics or stories that we're brought up with that have a lot of good lessons in them. I really think that the theme wonder can touch a lot of people's hearts and also be a lot of fun for campaigns.
So when we think about the people in need, they may be wondering how those needs are going to be met. And I know we mentioned the United Way funds over 50 programs, and those range from basic needs, things like food and shelter, 100 Nights, the community kitchen, food pantries in the region, all the way to childcare that you mentioned, and direct services, substance abuse, mental health services, services for disabilities. There's just such a wide range of things in terms of needs, both in the Monadnock region and then how they're being met by the donor giving and these workplace campaigns. So we have people maybe wondering about the services they need, but at the same time, we have people out there who perhaps have resources they can bring to this that probably wonder, how do I direct my resources? So how would they get involved with a campaign?
That's a great question. And you may have noticed, or the audience may have noticed in the Keene Sentinel this weekend, we listed our volunteers for the Wonder campaign with the kickoff coming up this week. And we often say there's hundreds of volunteers, and there are. Contacting our office and myself, there's plenty of opportunities. We have, as you know, 5 divisions, from commercial to industrial to special to community. And then we have divisions that are town divisions for the businesses that are in various towns. Each of those divisions has a division chair. And within the structure, there are team captains. We're actually kind of calling those folks ambassadors as well now, because they're out there as ambassadors for the United Way, and perhaps even more so the 50 programs. There are still opportunities to volunteer and be part of those divisions. If I'm contacted, or John Round as the overall campaign chair is contacted, we can find spots for people. But there's also employee campaigns in the various businesses. And currently we have a number of the businesses in the Monadnock region that have what we call loaned employees. Different companies have provided us their resources as far as key people who have been trained that can call on these various companies and try to assist the campaign coordinator to put together a campaign that fits for that company. So there's also opportunities to volunteer and be part of your campaigns at your workplace. We also have a group of folks that are involved in leadership giving, which is a program that started in the mid-'80s. The Monadnock United Way started it very low-key, but has become a very, very important part of our campaign. I think in 1985, some visionaries and leaders in the United Way, such as Joe Bowdy, Nancy Sporborg, various people, my wife Dixie Gurian, were part of putting together the leadership giving program called the Grand Monadnock Repelling Team. Kind of just like the Monadnock region, do things a little different. As you go down, rappel off the mountain, and you go lower and lower, you're helping people more and more by your gift. So it recognizes couples and individuals who give $500 or more. And that part of the campaign has grown to be 45% of the campaign. And we have volunteers that are calling on individuals and also in their own workplaces, asking folks in a very, very respectful way if you want a benchmark in terms of how to help these 50 programs. $500 is the leadership giving threshold. And so it's a way to say, if somebody needs a benchmark in terms of making a difference, that's a good place to shoot. And then, of course, it goes up into the many thousands above that.
And I really want to highlight that, we think $500, and most of us think, wow, that would be challenging to give that amount of money. But to really put it in perspective, it's $12 a week. It's maybe those extra cups of coffee that we're drinking, that kind of thing. And that the demand out there for support for these services has gone up and up and up. And the resources available from the state level, from the federal level, have gone down and down and down. So it's become more and more challenging to really meet the needs of the Monadnock region and the demands for those resources that support all those programs out there. So giving and being a leadership giver in particular becomes even more critical when you think about the fact that it's almost 50% of the giving that goes on in the Monadnock region. Now, I think that also is a tribute to the number of people who are leadership givers. When you think about 50% of our population is really falling in that category, that's a pretty amazing number of people that are really out there giving.
It is, and the flip side of it, where I thought you were going to, is because I know how you are appreciative of everyone. There's 55% of the campaign that's coming from folks that they're not at the leadership giving level, but it could be as big of or bigger sacrifice for them to give. So it's a balancing act, and we're very appreciative of every donor to the United Way, and we need them all. But you mentioned, if I could, as an aside, you mentioned meets the needs. And one of the things about the Monadnock region that has also been mentioned, but the various campaign themes we've had over the years, and the fact that we still have our own theme, we're very much understand the United Way of America's strength and what they bring to the table, but we also have a very local message to give in terms of the Monadnock region and these 50 programs that are supported to help people in the Monadnock region. Meet the Needs was one of the campaign themes. I remember you mentioned the Red Feather. Jenny Norman's campaign back in the mid-'80s, put a feather in your cap. And if I could, in 1988, the theme Make the Difference, which is one I was very involved with. And it's still, to me, it's not a cliche. It's so important to make a difference. And the United Way, I think, is one of the best ways that I found personally that I feel I'm making a difference for others in need in the community. So I think it was the 80s, the late 70s, and the mid 80s. I think the Monadnock United Way won like 9 different awards for the campaigns, not just national, but international, I think, as well. And so we have a proud tradition of these themes. And wonder, of course, I just saw somebody today who was leaving the United Way office and said, I love the theme. And I hope that a lot of people love the theme. But the Make the Difference, put a feather in your cap, join the fight, and on. Each one of them, of course, most recently, the Be Part of the Magic, Wink Faulkner's campaign last year, and Give, Grow, Live, that resonates. So there's those campaign themes are a lot of fun, but they give a real message and give us as volunteers a way to convey that message.
And I think that theme actually is even being used by another United Way here in the state of New Hampshire this year, which was exciting to see that, you know, again, we're sort of a leaders in the field and continuing that tradition of that theme. I think you mentioned something that's really important for our audience to know, and that is that when folks give here in the Monadnock region, that money stays here in the Monadnock region going to service. And I think that's a really important message for people to hear, because I think United Way is recognized worldwide as one of the biggest fundraising organizations. But then their local efforts that are really making things happen for the regions they're located in.
I think that's a great point. And I don't back away, though, from saying that 1% of what we raise goes to the United Way of America. I mean, the Give, Advocate, Volunteer, Live United resonates with me and us as well. So we are getting a lot of benefit, I think, from the synergy of being part of the largest charitable, I think, organization in the world, as you said, Kelly, but also by having that localness, and that most of the funds do stay here. And it's not just funds, it's our resources, it's our people, all the energy and the collaboration and the synergies that come from the way the United Way facilitates and can bring players to the table, partners to the table, if you will. So there's a lot of the local value in my mind, and I think in a lot of people's minds. I hope we can get that across in this campaign. It's a lot more than the $2,106,234 that we plan on raising this year. And I think we will raise. There's a lot of determination to do that. But it's all the social capital, if you will, that's used and focused. But the United Way of America also, and you could speak to this, but I've learned a lot from you about the collective impact and I think the United Way across the country in different ways is trying to be more businesslike and showing where the money going to the partner agencies is not just making a difference, but meeting the needs and addressing root cause issues and being sustained and bringing groups together or agencies together in a collaborative way. That's a real value that the United Way, the Monadnock United Way, is adding by being at the table for the collective impact work that's going on.
And I think Tony Ellsworth was on the show last week and talked a bit about the value add that goes way beyond the donated dollar that the United Way brings to the agencies that are partners and that we work with, whether they're a funded or a non-funded partner. We've had both on the show. And, you talked about that really bringing people together, being focused. That's both a worldwide effort to really have people focus on the impact that the work that goes on can have on things like income and education and health. And, here in the Monadnock region, we've identified through the Wellbeing Report the educational attainment and economic opportunity and child welfare as issues. And we know that the work of our agencies goes into really supporting all three of those things.
And that's a very important point. We're going through change, the Monadnock United Way. Who isn't going through change? And we're trying to be the collective impact of philosophy and discipline, if you will, I think makes businesses or any donor look at the United Way a little differently and say, they're acting like the business I work at does. I mean, I think that collective impact is an important part of the value we bring. But I also think that during times of change, it can also cause there to be a lot of uncertainty. And our donors may be asking, well, what does collective impact mean to the other agencies, the safety net, or agencies that are maybe don't fall right into the early childhood development or the economic disparities or the educational attainment needs that were rightfully identified. And I think the fact that we can show the 50 agencies or the 50 programs and agencies that are in the brochure for Wonder, this year's campaign, are the full breadth of needs. And that the priority, although early childhood development is a priority of the Monadnock United Way, and I'm glad it is. I think you mentioned there's like 12 programs that are being funded out of those 50 that are directly related to early childhood development. There's also the remaining 38 that cover a whole breadth of, and you covered some of them in the beginning, from mental health to the Samaritans to home health care. I just feel that message is one of the real messages that we have to get across in this year's campaign, that there has not been a change from the standpoint of meeting a breadth of needs. And those are going to be looked at through the allocations process, and the priorities are going to be those needs that are identified as being compelling and that where there's agencies and plans to address them. But the collective impact provides us a tool to be better in what we do and what our agencies do by working together. But it doesn't mean that we've changed, to me, the very compelling mission of the United Way to improve people's lives, to mobilize
Diverse partners
to make a difference.
And I do think that's an important message to get across right now during times of change. And I think for both of our agencies who we're working with and the programs that they provide and the systems that are being put in place, all of those things, it's all new for everyone. We're changing even how we raise funds because we recognize that the world's changing around us. And part of the responsibility of the United Way is to be responsive both to the needs of the Monadnock region, but then how we address those needs and how we mobilize people. And you know, that convening, facilitating that you're talking about, I think is one of the most critical roles of the United Way. And of course, I'm the Collective Impact Director, so I'll say that. But I think that convening, that facilitating, that creating the awareness out there about how people can live united, how people can come together to make a difference in people's lives, whether it's giving, volunteering, or advocating, is a critical role the United Way plays in the region. And I can't honestly imagine the Monadnock region without it. You know, I think the value add and the service that's provided, and you mentioned business, and I really want to highlight that it goes way beyond. I think we think of corporations typically as part of the workplace campaign, but if we really think about the individual donor, the small business, the educational institution, schools are part of the campaign. Nonprofits are part of the campaign. So it's not our big corporations here in the Monadnock region. It's all of you. It's every single person who lives, who works, who plays here, who is really a part of what makes it work and makes it happen.
There's a number of ways. You said a lot.
I did.
So businesses, this year one of the campaign emphasis, if you will, that John Round as the campaign chair, Kathy Harrington, myself kind of discussed from the get-go was emphasis on the changing dynamics of corporate giving. And by that, we still have, thankfully, the big companies that are really doing a lot of good work. And I mean, the CNSs, Mark of Homage, Liberty, Timken.
The banks.
Yeah, that's a
There's
dangerous thing. We have hundreds of them to start listing.
We have a long list.
But also the fact that I believe probably 80% of the GDP in New Hampshire is from smaller businesses. And how do we get our message across? It's more difficult because you don't have 400 or 800 people in one spot. But one of the keys to this year's campaign is our outreach to the smaller businesses and trying to get the message across in terms of collective impact being very, very similar to continuous improvement, which a lot of companies have been practicing for many years. But the lean manufacturing, the efficiencies, the getting teams together to make your operation eliminate waste and become more efficient and get more collaboration, that's very similar to collective impact and what we're trying to do. And I think that a lot of these small businesses, if they see that, yes, we have many needs out there and we have good agencies and programs addressing them, but we're also trying to be more and more efficient, eliminate waste, the collaboration, the things we've talked about. We think that that message will be compelling to businesses of all size. And we actually this year have a new division that's really focused on the companies, larger and small, but wherever we felt that that message could really be brought home. And Alan Stroshine is the division chair who is working with John, myself, the loaned employees, to work with specific companies and try to get that message to the right persons.
Now you have this focus on small business that's happening. You've got the workplace campaign. Kickoff is September 11th. You're actually doing 2 kickoffs this year. We have one at the Country Club on September 11th and out at Rivermead on September 16th on the eastern side of the mountain. And that's open to the public to join in those and really be a part of that.
I think that's really a good point that you just brought up. Yes, this year we're having 2 kickoffs, and one over in Peterborough and one here in Keene, to really show the fact that the Monadnock United Way, we support agencies doing work in 36 towns. And the eastern part of our region is an important part of what we do. And a number of the programs, as you know, are located or have offices in Peterborough or in the eastern part of the region. It's not a new thing, Kelly. I remember, I think it was in 1984, according to our history. It was before I was real involved, but we encompassed part of Hillsborough, the western part of Hillsborough County at that time. And then in 1988, we had our first combined campaign. And I can remember I was the chair that year for Make the Difference. And Chris Flynn from Peterborough Savings Bank was co-chair for the eastern part. And I think we've been having the joint campaigns since then. But I think there's still a challenge. All these years later, we have to reinvent the fact that the eastern part of the Monadnock region is a crucial part that is getting services and that we should be giving equal attention to. And I think this year, by having the 2 kickoffs, and as you said, everybody's invited on the 11th at 5 o'clock at the Country Club, and on the 16th at Rivermead, the village, the new portion of Rivermead. That's a really important point.
And that one's also at 5 o'clock, I believe. I know we are asking for RSVPs. People can call the United Way if they're interested in attending those. They're fun events. It's a great place to network, to hear more about what's going on, to see the work of some of those workplace campaigns and just campaign efforts in general, and how people can either be more involved or see what those campaigns look and feel like, because we have pace setters out there who've already started their campaigns before campaign kickoff. We have some groups that choose to be leaders in that, and yes. It's been fun to actually watch some of those events going on, and I know our agencies are out there talking about their work within those campaigns and really advocating for not only the support of the community, but involvement of the community in these kinds of efforts.
Absolutely. And I'd start listing the pace setters, and if I missed one, I'd be in real trouble. But yeah, the City of Keene is certainly one, and Timken, and CNS, and ES3,
Yeah.
Kapoloff Insurance, Clark Mortensen.
Yeah.
So we're very pleased. Southwestern Community Services.
And I know that there's a lot of organizations, I think of organizations like UPS, and we may not always think of them as being real involved in something like this, but they actually are very locally involved, have already been out doing some workplace campaign related things, but they do a rose sale
Yes.
Later in the year with those funds really being directed towards the United Way supported agencies. And so it's fun to see, you mentioned the fun attached to running a workplace campaign, and I think that's the other sort of beauty of having a theme like this. Over the last couple of years, I've seen some really neat things happen, whether it was a magician coming in last year as part of being part of the magic. Just people's creativity really flows with this, and it's fun to see what they end up doing with it. I know the hospital had little bags that looked like top hats with little rabbit peeps in them, that kind of thing, and with their whole message and the pledge forms and things.
I think the fun part of it, which has always been emphasized, and sometimes it's not my strong point, and I have a lot of people pulling me along, but I think it's one of my fondest memories of the United Way and these 30-some years. And fortunately, outside of my office at 21 Center Street, there's a bulletin board. Well, there's two bulletin boards with pictures of campaign volunteers going back many years. And every day I look at that bulletin board and I see a picture of Dave Landry, or I see a picture of Cliff Smith, who is now down in Florida, or I could go on and on, Ken Jew. I mean, it's just, to me, it's the fabric of the United Way, and it's why as you started off asking me, it's why I'm here. I'm thrilled to be here, and those people live on every day. There's a lot of us that history, and going back to the people I didn't know, like Ellis Robertson, and I was reading that history, and in the 60s we were going through a low point, the early 60s, and I think it was Bob Mallet who led a campaign in '64, which was kind of going to be decisive in terms of the future. And there's a lot for us to show up at 21 Center Street, 23. Sorry, my son lived at 21 Grand Street. I can hear the laughter. I can honestly feel their presence. The executive director, when I came first to the United Way in the mid-'80s, was Jack Jennings, and he was a retired captain from the Navy, and he had a stern side, a business side, and just a fun side. And I think you know this, when I first got to the office a few months ago, I saw a wooden horse, a statue. I don't know if it's Don Quixote's horse or whose horse it is, but it's a carved wooden horse. And I said, and I looked at the little tag on it, and it said, John C. Jennings, U.S. Navy, and then he had in parentheses, tired. That's his sense of humor. But that horse sits in my office right now, and I look at that every day too, and remember his example, his heart, what he did for the United Way and for the region. And then when he retired in the late 80s, Kathy Snow and Cliff Smith as co-presidents. I think that's the first time that's happened, but they worked together as co-presidents before Cliff went down to Florida, and Kathy remained until a few years ago. All that leadership, all that heart, all those volunteers, that's why I feel so passionate, and why so many feel so passionate about the Monadnock United Way.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned that serious with that fun piece, because it is serious. You know, giving, volunteering, advocating, there's a serious side to that. But I think one of the wonders of the whole campaign and this year's campaign theme is that ability to make it fun and bring people together, really getting them to connect in a different way while doing something good. And so it's really exciting that people both have that opportunity out there to engage in something like this. At the same time, it then contributes to making such an amazing difference out there, and has the impact that goes far beyond, you know, you or I or those people that contribute. When we really think about it, all of our neighbors, our friends, our families are touched somehow by the services that are provided through not only the funding but the volunteers that are really engaged in this.
And I think that there are so many parts to that fabric, but one that I thought of as you were speaking was companies who have campaigns, and we're hoping that more and more companies do. They are really, that's part of the fabric of their company. And just as if I learned at Mark Mamage how important continuous improvement events were to not just increasing efficiency, but we had people meeting and talking from all over the world who didn't necessarily have that opportunity. And I think the companies that practice that are stronger in a lot of tangible ways, just from the standpoint of the relationships and getting to know each other and working together. And I think that the collective impact work, again, that we're doing, in some ways, maybe getting partner agencies working together and having that same type of dialogue and maybe new kinds of relationships. So, and I believe that employees also, that they feel better and closer to their companies when they see their company be a leader in terms of various things, not just the United Way, but I think the United Way presents a very compelling way for a company to show that it cares, that it has heart, and that also that it empowers its people. The loaned employees that we have, the 10 loaned employees that we referred to earlier, we had training with them 2 or 3 weeks ago. I ended up feeling invigorated and enthused just by the spirit they brought and the wonder that they brought in terms of learning about the agencies, and especially the ones we went to visit on tours. And I'd hear the talk the next morning in terms of how these loaned employees would go home and at their dinner table talk to their children and their spouses about what they learned that day. And I think that companies that provide their employees that opportunity, whether it be loaned employees or just by having a campaign and letting agencies come and present at their company, I think the benefits to that company, those employees in terms of their own growth and maybe the directions of their lives, if I could be overly, but I really believe that, and the community itself, the benefits, I just feel are, I said intangible earlier, I believe they're tangible. I think you can probably do a study and measure the results or the esprit de corps, the productivity, the loyalty of employees to companies that provide that kind of opportunity and provide that kind of leadership and example.
And we know there's been a lot of studies done on that, and that the millennial generation in particular feels a real strong sense of social responsibility, and that's a primary reason that they choose who they work for and with, because they want to be involved, they want to be making a difference out there. So, you know, it may be cliche to say that make a difference, and, you know, we hear it a lot, but people place a lot of value on that in their lives, and what you're passionate about, and how you can be involved and give to that. So I think, the diversity of the services and programs that are supported by the United Way, almost everybody can find some way and some passion in there, whether it's children or senior citizens, whoever it may be, they can find a passion in there. And I think, so it provides quite an opportunity. And I was at a recent board meeting, and people were going around because a new member had come in, introducing themselves, and all of them talked about being lifers. That they, started maybe in a workplace campaign, or they got involved in being a volunteer for the allocations process, how that money is then distributed to the agencies. And that can be part of what people can volunteer for and be involved with as well. So, there's a role for all of you. I guess that's what I think both Cam and I want to say to you, that there's a role for every single person out there, whether you're a donor, whether you're a volunteer, whether you're both. We invite you to really to give, to volunteer, and to be an advocate. Because that's an important role for us, to be an advocate for the agencies that are providing these services out there, and to also be an advocate for the United Way and the work that we do and how we can live united here in the Monadnock region. I know we need to come to a close, Cam. Any last words that you want to share?
Well, I think something that's very powerful to me is that the United Way represents so many different qualities that we talked about, the 50 partner programs and agencies, the collective impact, the vitality of our business community, perhaps being enhanced by that type of leadership in terms of support of the community, and particularly United Way. And that was compelling to me when I first became aware of the United Way in a deep way back in the mid-'80s. And the mentors that I had both at Peerless, whether it be Bob Pine or Joe Youngs, or the leaders at Markham Homage, and their fervor and their heart for the United Way. But it really came down to a personal, when I had a personal situation in my life, and my son was involved in an auto accident in 1989, the agencies that came to help our family and Sean, that to me is as compelling or more compelling than anything else.
So I want to thank you for joining us, and I invite you again to give, to volunteer, to advocate. Thanks for being here.